The Denver Broncos have lost star wide receiver Tim Patrick to a torn ACL, ending his season before it even begins. What are the ramifications of his injury and how might it impact the Broncos offense? We break down that and recap day 6 at the Broncos camp at the UCL Training Center on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day on your favorite audio podcasting platforms, or whether you're watching us on YouTube, please do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage, because we have you covered every single day all year long. From the South Stands to the End Zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, senior Broncos analyst and reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Sayre, the excitement was at an all-time high leading up to practice on day 6 at the UCL Training Center because the pads were coming on. We were anticipating some popping going on, but unfortunately, the whole excitement fizzled out with an injury to Tim Patrick, who will now miss the entire 2022 NFL regular season with a torn ACL.
Just brutal news. Obviously, Tim Patrick, a beloved player by the fans, the coaches, his own teammates. Everybody loves Tim Patrick, right? And he's been one of the best players on the team, on the offense for sure, over the last couple of seasons. One of the most consistent sources of quality offense that the Broncos have had. A lot of clutch plays. And really, I think the team's going to miss him. He brings such a great presence to the field, whether it's, as a run blocker, he's very effective. As obviously a red zone target, he's got that big body, those long arms. He can make those contested catches, those 50-50 balls. He's got strong hands. Obviously, remember, he didn't have any drops a couple of seasons ago. Tim Patrick, a very valuable player, very underrated player, got a second contract for a reason, right? So now the Broncos have to kind of figure out, okay, what's the plan now without Tim Patrick? How are we going to adjust our offense? Because he's not the only receiver that's going to be recovering, or that is recovering from an injury right now. There's other guys in the training room, not necessarily for season-long injuries, but we've got a lot of issues right now to address at this wide receiver position that was looking pretty overloaded going into camp.
Oh, it really was, too. And now George Paton and the Broncos have to make some decisions internally. Do they believe that the depth that they have at wide receiver is good enough for them to maybe withstand the blow of losing a guy like Tim Patrick? Or do you look at the free agency market right now and take a look at some other guys? Like, there's a name, Will Fuller's available out there, which, Sayre, like, in my opinion, looking at the available names, Will Fuller only seems like the most feasible one. But then again, like, he comes with a history of injuries himself. Would he be able to make it through the season? Or do the Broncos have so much confidence right now in the guys that they have, like the Brandon Johnsons, the Montreal Washingtons, the Trey Quinns, and even maybe some Caden Davis stuff stepping up? Here's one thing I want to make very clear. You cannot, in my opinion, replace the impact that Tim Patrick has for this Broncos team. When we talk about a guy who is a consistent chain mover for the Broncos, a guy who's led the team in touchdowns the last 2 seasons from a receiving standpoint, you cannot replace that. And this is where I think you really have to have production from other guys. You have to have other guys step up. But I will pinpoint this about practice. We were there. We were watching it. He made a tremendous play with Sayre Bassi kind of underneath him. He rose up, caught the football, landed with 2 feet, and then took a step. And then all of a sudden he was on the ground, sets the ball down, and he just immediately grabs his knee. And the air out of the entire facility, just all of us media beat reporters there were watching, his teammates were watching. It just got silent. And immediately trainers came over, the whole team. Like literally Nathaniel Hackett said in his post-practice presser, in situations like that with an injury, sometimes we just flip the field and go the other way. So I tossed my paper and he said, you know what? Like, this is Tim Patrick. Like, we need to go show him love. And the entire team gathered around Patrick as he was carted off the field there. And just a big blow. And you could tell, like, guys like Corliss Sutton, even Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, guys were emotional a little bit talking about just, the injury to Tim Patrick. And now it's been confirmed the MRI reveals a torn ACL. He will be out for the 2022 NFL season, but he's also not the other injury as well. Here, Sarah's Damarri Crockett left early on, and they believe that the knee injury for him will be significant as well, awaiting the MRI on that. The bigger question here is who on this roster, if we're looking internally, Sayre, do we believe can step up? And it's not necessarily like just to play the role of Tim Patrick, because Nathaniel Hackett said it. We don't want these receivers just to play and specialize in being the outside guy or the inside guy or a motion guy. We want them to do it all. So in your opinion, when you factor in that Nathaniel Hackett is looking for versatility on this roster, who might be that guy?
Well, it sounds like Montreal Washington is having the best camp of all the other receivers so
Yeah.
far, that which is great news because I think there were a lot of rumors that maybe he wasn't going to be so involved in the offense originally, but that could change. I think obviously you go out there, you prove yourself. That's great news. And just like with Tim Patrick, I mean, he got his opportunity. I mean, a lot of guys, in front of him on the depth chart either got hurt or weren't playing well enough. He got his chance. This is an opportunity for somebody to do the same, and you hate to see it. You totally hate to see it. I think for me, Seth Williams was the guy that, I was kind of looking at in last year's draft as, could he be the guy to replace Tim Patrick if the Broncos, would either have traded him or let him go in free agency or what have you at this point in time? So maybe you're now getting to kind of see like the what if scenario. What if Tim Patrick wasn't with the team anymore? Could Seth Williams actually step up and be that guy? Well, now he's getting the chance to potentially do that. He's the big body receiver that could like legitimately replace Tim Patrick in terms of size and speed and all those different things. Seth Williams, and he made a nice play against the Chargers last year too, his first target as an NFL receiver. So he got out there and he showed some things, and definitely in the preseason, we also remember what he did last year, the run after the catch that he had in that preseason game. Very impressive stuff from Seth Williams. So to me, he's that guy. And in terms of size, speed, the ability to win 50-50 balls, physical in the running game, because we know Auburn ran the ball quite a bit, obviously, when he was there. Definitely, he's that guy that I think on the roster, just a physical and athletic comparison, may be the most likely replacement, quote unquote, for Tim Patrick.
Yeah, it's gonna be a task there for Zach Ghazzani, but then again, like these guys are getting a lot of reps. They know the offense as is, or they're still in the process of learning it, which gives them a better in-house advantage. George Paton could take a look at some other teams. He could be taking a look at the free agency market. We'll continue to monitor the situation as it becomes a little bit more fluid here for this Broncos team. But Nathaniel Hackett even mentioned too that he said, we want to show Tim support. We want to shower him with love because he's part of our family. He says, but on the flip side, we have to tell other guys like, hey, now it's time for other guys to step up. With Tim Patrick now being out, it could be relied upon by two guys, not just one guy to step up. It could be multiple guys that has to have an increase in what they're asked to do by the Broncos going forward. But I also think like a benefit, if we're going to pull any kind of silver lining out of it, I think Tim Patrick will benefit from being around guys like from KJ Hamler, Cortland Sutton, guys who have gone through a torn ACL, guys who have been there, because there is going to come the lows with it after you have the surgery, you go through the rehab process, and you're just looking forward to getting back to where you were. But then again, Tim Patrick is no stranger to overcoming adversity, overcoming a major injury like he sustained in Utah. The fact he was able to come back from that, I think he'll be very resilient in his return from ACL, but he's got a good support system with this team around him. And I think that's something to look forward to pull out in terms of something good out of a bad situation. But Broncos country, coming up here in just a moment, a rookie cornerback for the Broncos continues to stand out in practice early on. Could he have an increased role in the preseason and potentially the regular season? We talk about that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. It's our good friends over there at BetterHelp. And life is full of twists and turns, and it's important to show up for yourself through it all. As we heard with Broncos wide receiver KJ Hamler the other day, he said it's important for him to be vulnerable. And in life, we get thrown a lot of challenges in our day-to-day life. There's a lot of pressure that we face as men, women, and children in this society. And it's always good that you look out for yourself. And now you can with BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online and available to people worldwide. You can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so you don't have to be on camera if you don't want to. And getting therapy every week is as easy as a few clicks on your laptop or your phone. You can visit their website and read their testimonials that are posted daily at betterhelp.com. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. And they have a special offer for listeners of Locked On Broncos. You can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/Locked On. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/Locked On. One Broncos cornerback is standing out outside of Patrick Surtain at Broncos training camp. It's a rookie that has some high expectations potentially heading into the preseason. Once again, Broncos country, thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite podcast provider or here on YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in for all your Broncos news, content, and coverage. Kind of talking about the cornerback group here, Sarah. I mean, we've been really highlighting a lot of training camps so far with Patrick Surtain. He's been unbelievable. That trend continues. Nothing changed in that front there. But I did want to highlight a rookie cornerback who's been making plays and has been standing out in the last couple of days of Broncos camp, and that is rookie cornerback Damarri Mathis out of Pitt. They've been doing a lot of different things with him in terms of how they utilize him on the outside, the inside, and they've been matching up against some taller wide receivers as well. Like, he's not the tallest cornerback. So the fact that he's going up against some sizable guys and coming away with the advantage, I think, is a good sign there. And we see that because he comes from an NFL-style defense at Pitt, and that's one of the reasons the Broncos drafted him. They believe that his skill set translates well to the next level. And in Tuesday's practice at the UCL Training Center, we saw just that. The Broncos attempted to go down deep to Trey Quinn, and I thought that Damarri Mathis did a really good job of getting in his hip and shielding him off to where Trey Quinn couldn't even go make a play for the ball down the sideline. That's how good the coverage was there. And then they had a play with Seth Williams, a guy we just talked about in the previous segment, where they looked to throw a jump ball to him, and Damarri Mathis played the hip really well, came through, knocked the ball away, incomplete, no flag on the play. And the Broncos secondary of Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, and Patrick Surtain, those guys were celebrating. They were going nuts. And the defense just continues to look really good. But it was a standout day for Damarri Mathis.
And perfect timing, right? With K1 Williams being injured and obviously the pads coming on for the first time. It's kind of what we were looking at as potential of who could step up in his place and young players getting opportunities to do just that. Damarri Mathis, a guy that a lot of people really liked in the pre-draft process, and for good reason. I mean, this guy had jumped, I think, a 43.5-inch vertical jump at his pro day, and he was interviewed about it after the fact and was like, I wish I'd have got 44 or something like that, something crazy. So obviously very competitive, obviously very athletic, and he brings a lot of potential versatility to that defensive backfield. So definitely great to see him taking advantage of the opportunity with an injured starter. Basically, your nickel corner is a starter in today's NFL. So being out there and doing a good job, I think it bodes well for the Broncos' depth throughout this season. We've talked, do they need to go after a veteran corner? Do they need to bring somebody in from the outside? You know, there was some talk of that before training camp started, right after OTAs. You give these young players a shot and kind of see what they can do. Look, you brought in this entire coaching staff, right? Nathaniel Hackett, Ejiro Evero, Christian Parker, all these different guys, these pieces that you put into place. One of their biggest roles for this Denver Broncos team is going to be player development, and not just over the course of a long period of time, but rather quickly in some cases. And you got to have these guys ready to play. Doesn't matter that the Broncos didn't have a first round draft pick. Damarri Mathis, you know, he could have easily been a third round pick, and I don't think anybody would have batted an eye. The Broncos got him in round 4. Felt kind of like a steal. Now it's great to hear that as the pads have come on, he's making some strides and making improvements, showing that he can be one of those potential key role players this season.
Well, we just got an update while we're recording this episode, Locked On Broncos, from Mike Kliss. Source MRI confirms Demaria Crockett, running back, suffered an ACL injury as well. Unfortunately, the Broncos lose 2 guys to an ACL injury in one day on Tuesday's practice. Going back to cornerback now, though, as you mentioned with Mathis, the expectations, I think we'll see a lot of him in the preseason. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a majority of the preseason reps because they want to see that instant transition to competing against NFL style of talent versus the college level. What can he adjust on? Like, what are things he can put on tape through 3 games of preseason action where all of a sudden the coaches say, okay, this is what he does well, this is where he needs to improve. And then they can go into the season working on those things and trying to help him get better at some of the things maybe he's not the best at this point of his young career in the National Football League. But I also want to talk about some of the other cornerbacks here on this roster. Michael Ojemudia and Bless Austin continue to impress as well in training camp practice, Sarah. And look, Michael Ojemudia, in my opinion, I don't feel like he's being talked about enough by a lot of people in the media, but there's certain things that the Broncos are doing with him that I can't necessarily describe here because it's against reporting guidelines for the team, that has me excited about maybe what his role could be with this team. As we talk about the Broncos having a wide variety of depth there, Michael Ojimudi, I think, will play a role in the defense this upcoming season based on some of the things we're seeing so far at training camp. And he had a great play against Brandon Johnson in coverage on Tuesday's practice, where Brandon Johnson ran about a 12 to 15-yard route, planted, throttled down, came back inside. Michael Ojimudi had closed in on it, got one hand around the hip of Johnson, brought his ball side hand forward and knocked it away. We talk about complete technical fundamental play. That was there by Michael Ojimudi, and he had a couple of those plays against the Kansas City Chiefs last year in the regular season finale. Bless Austin, in my opinion. I think that Michael Ojimudi and he will be the main backups to Ronald Darby and Patrick Surtain on the outside. And as we've seen and as we've discussed with the Tim Patrick injury, you're literally just one injury away from having to rely on some other guys, and you need to make sure that the depth that you have there is good. And I think that Michael Ojimudi and Bless Austin will be good depth pieces for the Broncos at the cornerback position. But there's an ongoing competition for this Broncos team as we get a little bit closer to the regular season. Yes, punters, folks. Punters are people too. What's the latest on the competition that we perceive is going on between Sam Martin and Corliss Waitman? We're going to break that down coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about BetOnline.net, the sponsor of today's episode. Locked on Broncos. BetOnline.net is the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the number one online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the number one online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and more. They have you covered. So head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action all in one place. BetOnline.net. BetOnline, where the game starts. Is there a punter competition going on with this Denver Broncos team right now between Sam Martin and Corliss Waitman? Thank you once again, Broncos country, for tuning in and making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Sayre, I couldn't help but notice in Tuesday's practice, I feel like there's a little bit of competition brewing at the punter position because, in a time like right now, when we talk about the injury just happened to not only Tim Patrick, Damarri Crockett, the thing I'm looking at is, why are the Broncos carrying two punters on the roster? Corliss Waitman was one of those post-Super Bowl additions in terms of being added to the team off of waivers, spent some time with the Steelers last year, and kicked in a couple of games, had a 63-yard punt. I tell you what, like Waitman as a left-footed punter, he can boom the football downfield. He did just that. And then Sam Martin, obviously, is your veteran guy that's been around for quite some time. I think there's a little bit of competition going on where Waitman is looking to edge out Sam Martin.
Well, and money talks in these kinds of situations, right? Sam Martin, I believe if the Broncos cut him, Cody, they could save over $2 million on the salary cap. So, there might be some financial motivation for keeping two punters around at this point. And Corliss Waitman, it was only a couple of punts, but had his season ended after, or if it had gone exactly as it did in the couple of games, the couple of opportunities that he got over the course of an entire season, he would have led the league in punting average. So that was a long roundabout way to say that he has a booming leg. He is able to kick the ball. He can kick the crap out of it. And in the mile high air, a left-footed punter that's able to kick the ball that far, I mean, it's kind of a crazy advantage. And that's one of the things I think about a punter competition that's so interesting is every time these opposing punters come into Denver, it feels like they're so much better than whoever the Broncos have at the punter position. And that's with all due respect to the guys that the Broncos have had back there. But it just feels like when the Broncos have, the Shane Lechlers of the world coming in, it's like Shane Lechler can kick the ball 80 yards every time he's out there. And the Broncos punters can't. They're either shanking it or they're getting punts blocked. I think for me, that's the number one thing that with Sam Martin, he's had a couple blocked as a Bronco. I believe that it's been at least a couple. If not, he's had at least 3 or 4 that have been almost blocked. And some situations there where in the return game, your coverage unit, you're not setting them up necessarily for the best opportunity to make a play. And so there's a lot of factors here about punting that go beyond just how many do you have inside the 20, how many touchbacks do you have versus how many you have inside the 20, what's your hang time. The Broncos need somebody that can go out there and not just outkick the coverage necessarily. They need somebody that can go out there and pinpoint the ball to let the coverage get down there in an appropriate amount of time and really pin these returners. But not only that, you can't be getting the ball blocked all the time. I mean, that has been a bit of a problem. And I think it's been fun to kind of pin that blame on Tom McMahon over the last couple of years. He's kind of been the whipping goat for a lot of people in Broncos country. But man, I think your players have to take some accountability for that as well. And Sam Martin, he's really the only special teams guy that's in competition this offseason.
It appears that way too. And Corliss Waitman, his first punt was like a 50 to 52 yard boomer down the left sideline. Like we're talking about being high up in the sky, allowing the coverage unit to get downfield. He also had the best hang time of the day, Sayre. And get this, one of his punts was a 5.24 hang time, which is unbelievable. It gave the Broncos gunners so much time to get downfield and to prepare to be able to cut off the return lane, which the Broncos need that element under Dwayne Stukes this upcoming season. For Sam Martin, his first attempt, it was blocked. And it was pressure. Kendall Hinton came off the edge late from being that cover guy who covers the gunner. He emerged late, came in and got a hand on it, was able to block it. But then Sam Martin, I thought his second punt was better. It put the Broncos offense inside the 5-yard line. So he flipped the field position really, really well. So these guys are going to continue to go neck and neck. And I imagine if both guys stay on the roster going into the first preseason game, whoever performs the best, so whoever gets the first series, second series, whoever performs the best in that first preseason game, I imagine will be the favorite to get the job for the upcoming season. In Broncos country, we're eager for your thoughts on the subject matter. When it comes to a punter competition, what are you looking for from a guy like Corliss Waitman or Sam Martin as the punter of this Denver Broncos team? What are some of the things you'd like to see? Let us know in the YouTube comment section down below. But that will wrap up today's episode. Locked On Broncos here, your favorite podcast provider here on youtube.com/Lockdown Broncos. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and discussion. We love interacting with everybody in the YouTube comment section, so make sure you drop your comments down below as well. Sayre, Bedinger, myself, we'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode, Lockdown Broncos. Tomorrow's practice anticipated to be a jog through pace. We'll see what the Broncos can do in full pads to jog through pace. You get the recap here, Lockdown Broncos.